We have there's 3 of us.
What else together? I can
Recording in progress.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
All right. Good evening. Welcome, everyone. This is a regular meeting of the Programs and Services Committee. It's Wednesday, February 5th. We are being audio and video recorded. To start the meeting, I'm Josh Brinsman, Chair of the Committee, Councilor at Large from Ward 4. Online, we have Vice Chair of the Committee, Councilor Bill Humphrey from Ward 5, and Councilor David Mickley from Ward 2. In the room with me, Councilor Julie Malachy from Ward 3, Councilor John Oliver, Ward 1, and Councilor Alan Lobovitz from Ward 6. All right, why don't we get started here? First item is item 490-24. This is requesting a discussion regarding GoGo Newton. I believe we have Mignon Murray, Director of Older Adult Services. Nailed it.
Well done.
Jen Martin, Director of Transportation Planning. And welcome back. Good, how are you? What's your role now, consultant?
Yeah, that sounds
Is
fine.
that technical? Okay.
Yeah.
So, you guys have something planned, right?
Yes,
So, have at it.
okay. Well, I will present, so I'm Nicole Friedman. I used to be.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't say that.
Director of
Sorry.
Transportation Planning, but now I help out a little bit behind the scenes. So you guys had great questions on GoGo and Numo, so I thought I would sort of walk you through it. And Jen will do our slides here. Okay, so to answer your questions, I want to give you a little bit of the background with Numo, and then we'll tell you a little bit how GoGo works, and then we have direct answers to your questions. Okay, next slide. So this is on Numo, and the thing to know to really understand is Numo was something called a micro transit model. So we, the city, paid by service hour. So we would choose the number of vehicles we wanted floating at any one time to cover the demand. And we paid for each vehicle that was on the road a certain fee, like $50 to $70 per vehicle per hour. We had Numo from 2019 to 2024, and there were many permutations. We had some significant startup grant funding, nothing that was permanent grant funding. And at one point, we were able to serve everyone in the city, about on track for 80,000 trips in a year. But ongoing funding was hard to find, so we consolidated and served primarily older adults, low-income individuals, and people with disabilities. And because we were paying by service hour, we had to be careful. So we only did peak periods 9 a.m. to 6 p.m., limited weekend hours, and we stayed within Newton with a few select medical locations just outside the borders. And we were heavily subsidizing this. So we were charging $1 for low-income individuals, $3 for all standard fare. Okay, so our contract was coming to an end, and we said, what are we going to do? And two of the biggest factors we had, next slide, was cost and financial sustainability. Again, we did not have these ongoing grants. There was no funding source that would say we will cover this for operations ongoing. And Numo was expensive. In fact, when they rebid, their rates per service hour went up. So microtransit is incredibly efficient at scale. So when we were citywide, we got the sort of cost per trip down to maybe $17. But when we did, but that was also well over $1 million of grant funding mostly. So when we were a smaller system, that cost per trip went up. So, but because it was so expensive, there was cascading effects. So one was reliability. We were putting just the number of vehicles that we needed on the road. But then if you have a surge, there's no vehicle, and we were getting 6 to 10% of the trips a rider would go on and would say there's no vehicle available. So that was pretty tough. And when it's not reliable, then you have a customer service problem because everyone's flooding customer service, and then you'd see lines for the customer service. So that was a challenge. It was all a good system. I will say it was a good system, but we also want to see, could we do better now that we're talking about a small scale? It worked really well at the largest scale. And again, because you're paying by service hour, it'd be extremely inefficient to run it on non-peak hours like 7 p.m. Your cost per trip would be very exorbitant. You still need 3 or 4 vehicles floating, but you might only have a handful of trips. So next slide. There were some decision factors. When we were doing a bid, it really came down to Numo with the microtransit service model versus GoGo, which is what I call a sort of older adult friendly customer service overlay on top of Uber and Lyft. And we'll talk about what all that jargon means. But we were comparing 2 completely different models of how they did it. With the GoGo model, we are paying by trip. And that's really powerful. We're not paying to have a fleet of vehicles on the road, and we're paying whether people use it or not. We are just paying by trip. And we're able to take advantage of the scale that Uber and Lyft already have. At the same time, we're thinking financial sustainability. And we said, we can't subsidize these rides at the same level we're subsidizing them. So we could have chosen Numo and switched to a more moderate subsidy. And we could have chosen GoGo and kept the high subsidy that we're at. But in this case, next slide, we chose GoGo and a moderate subsidy. So we changed 2 things at once. We changed the model and the amount we chose to subsidize. Okay, so let's talk about GoGo. GoGo, again, it is the service model is it facilitates rides on Uber and Lyft. So you're taking advantage of the scale of Uber and Lyft. They always have vehicles on the road. They have them 24/7, 365. But GoGo really is about transportation for older adults. And what they did is they said, Uber and Lyft, that's a great system. How do we allow older adults to really use it effectively? And it's kind of an ingenious model, I think. They basically created a phone system, and they have incredibly well-trained, incredibly friendly customer service people. So a senior or an older adult can call in, and they have 2 options. They can talk to an actual person, or they can use the automated dial pad. And the vast majority are using the automated dial pad because it's actually faster. It starts to know the location where they are. But it really is so tailored for these older adults. When they sort of onboard, they can put in any impairments that they have or disabilities, or if they use a cane or a walker, if they need more time. And as we'll see on the next 2 slides, GoGo is vetting the driver. So you're not going to get any run-of-the-mill Uber or Lyft driver. They're making sure these are drivers that can work with older adults. They're also making sure the vehicles work for older adults. And there's 24/7, 365 monitoring all time. They'll pick up the phone if there's an emergency. And I always said with Numo, we were sort of a square peg, round hole. It was by far the best system at the time that we could find. GoGo was not in a position to do this. But I always say, if you've got your older adult on one side of the mall trying to get a ride, and the vehicle is on the other side of the mall, and this is a 92-year-old, that is an emergency. They need to connect. Okay, so we'll do the next slide. So when we set up GoGo, we were able to address some of those biggest challenges that we had. We could now do it 24/7, 365 because we're paying by trip. It wasn't inefficient. We didn't have to pay for 4 vehicles floating at really slow times. We could expand the service beyond Newton, and we did. And as I said, we decreased our full level of subsidy. We increased the rider fares. Okay, next slide. Okay, so how does it work? It's kind of really cool. So let's say I am an older adult. I call GoGo. I might choose to talk to a person or choose to use their automated dial system. It doesn't matter. But while I'm putting in my origin and destination, first off, it probably already has my home address. But it is actually cross-checking. So let's say I want to go to the hair salon at the Chestnut Hill Mall. Often, if you go into Google and you do the hair salon, it might actually put you at this location instead of this. That's an issue we had all the time with Numo. We have it all the time with Uber and Lyft. It's just getting the locations wrong. The GoGo system is proactively making sure and checking that it's correct. So we don't have those missed connections. Same, it'll have Newton Wellesley Hospital dialed in. Next slide, and then next slide. Okay, and then the next thing it does is while I'm on the phone with them, they're actually checking the vehicle. Is this, they look, do I have, can I get into a large vehicle? And the first car that might come might say, might be called up as an SUV, and I've written in that I can't step up into an SUV. So it rejects that vehicle. Might look at the next driver, and the next driver doesn't have enough stars, isn't in their system. If the person's not in their system, they will actually call the driver and talk to them one-on-one and ask first, are you willing to, work with an older adult? Are you willing to wait? If the driver says no, they call the next vehicle. And all this is happening in 30 seconds. We get the vehicle, and then I get in the car, next slide. And as I'm in the car, they're making sure I get in the car. So there's a lot of times I might be waiting at the curb, the car's supposed to get there, and somehow I don't see them, they don't see me. There's that 24/7, 365 monitoring. So if I don't get in that vehicle, they're gonna call me, they're gonna call the driver, they might send another vehicle. All of this is happening automatically. And then finally, when my trip is completed, they will, if I've got it set up this way, they might notify my mother, or in this case, it'd probably be my daughter. But she's only 9, so she doesn't care. Okay, next slide. So it's all built in, and that's the overlay on top of Uber and Lyft and YO Parks. So to date, we launched in July 2nd, and today what we really want to do is establish proof of concept. Because I think it's really scary, like, are we really gonna put our older adults on Uber and Lyft? Is this system as good as we hope it to be? And it really has done wonders. People are using it. We've had 1,000 registered riders. We've had 6,800 trips. And most importantly, we did see the complaints go way down. We still get complaints. We will always get complaints. But those missed trips and the inability to provide a vehicle at all times because of the financial sustainability, that has really gone down. So we're very pleased with this service. Okay, you don't have to take in all this, it'll be in your files, but we are surveying who we want to. On the top right, you see low/very low income registrants. That's half of our registrants are in that category. And 87% are in fact older adults. Because our system, again, is older adults, people with disabilities, people with low incomes, and people with very low incomes. But it really is primarily older adults and primarily people that don't have a lot of means. Okay, so you asked questions, and here are the answers, and hopefully this is repetitive at this point. You asked the goals. A big one was financial sustainability. We had Numo for 5 or 6 years. It was great. We knew we weren't going to have ongoing funding, so we wanted to make sure that we are within a budget that we can have in an ongoing way. Number 2, we decided to focus really on our older adults, people with disabilities, and low-income residents. So we knew it was going to be a smaller system, but we really wanted to focus on that. And with older adults, we wanted a system that was really focused and targeting older adults, which GoGo, that's exactly what they do. And then the last thing that we talked about, we wanted to address the service challenges. So the 2 requests that we got most often was 24/7, 365, and service beyond Newton. But reliability was always an ongoing challenge. And we'd have peaks and valleys, but as we got smaller, when we started downsizing Numo, the reliability became a challenge. Okay, user costs. You asked, what are the user costs of Numo versus GoGo? And again, remember, we changed 2 things. We changed the model, and we changed the pricing structure, the fare structure. We could have kept the same fare structure. So with Numo, we subsidized it more heavily. The riders paid less. The riders were paying $1 if they were low income, $3 if they were a general rider. On GoGo, the riders are now paying more, which makes it more sustainable. So $4 for very low, $6 and $8 is general. We also, because we allow it to be Newton plus the surrounding borders, we have a cap of $14. So the rider pays the first 4, 6, or 8. We pay the rest up to $14. And then after $14, the rider pays the rest. So if they want to take a trip to the, from the farthest point to the farthest point within those limits, they will pay more. But that's great for us. They're still getting it subsidized. So we didn't really want to tell people, we didn't want to make that kind of decision for people. Okay. Again, regardless of which operations partner we used, we would have changed that financial model. Okay, and what does this look like? So just to make it really clear, Numo, this is the cost per trip of GoGo versus Numo. So the cost per trip when we were just seniors, people with disabilities and lower incomes was substantially higher than with GoGo. So we were able to bring that down, which gets us to financial sustainability. And then you can see with the new pricing model, we are paying a smaller share of each trip. So we're paying about half per trip. Okay, and then the budget, you asked about the budget, we just have all of the data in here. You can see we had this Community Connections was a 3-year grant from the state. That was, they really liked the microtransit model, but it was a startup grant only. So that was gonna come to an end. And so we knew we were gonna have a lot less funding moving forward. And then you asked GoGo versus just going to Uber and Lyft. I think that was your question. And tell me if I'm wrong on that.
Sounds right.
Okay, so GoGo again, it's just older adult friendly overlay on top of Uber and Lyft. So it makes Uber and Lyft, I think, safe and accessible to our older adults. What I was always shocked by, we went through this whole RFP process with them, and I looked at them like, so, and we meet with them at least every week. We talk to them all the time. I'm like, you guys are going to make 60,000 off of this. And I'm like, that's nothing. And so they pass the Uber and Lyft fees on to us straight. They don't take even a percentage of it. So we will pay GoGo on top of the fares, the 60,000. So it's, to me, it's a tremendous value for what they're doing. I think that's all the questions. One thing I want to say is we are going to make some changes. So we've established proof of concept, and we were even more conservative than we need to. So we can actually probably provide more trips, and we have more funding that we can spend. So one change we made in December, we dropped the fee for everyone to $2 to get to and from the Cooper Center. When the new older adult center is done, that too will be $2. And we're going to reduce the fares a bit because we can and we want to. I mean, this is about quality of life for our older adults and low income folks. So that did not line up so well. That's completely, it's going to go from the 468 to 345. Sorry about that. So everyone is a little bit cheaper. And this cost cap is going to go from $14 to $16. So we'll pay, the rider will pay $2, $3, $4, or $5, depending on which tier they are. When it hits $16, then they will pay again. And that should mean that 80% of the trips within Newton are fully covered for them. And then we're going to increase the tier 2 income level. So there's a middle level where you get a subsidy if your income is $78,600 or less. And we realize that's actually really, really low. So we'll increase that to about $93,000, which is, I think, 80% of the AMI for a family of one. So I think that is the last slide. And fortunately, we have Mignon and Jen to answer lots of questions here as well.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Let me first acknowledge that we've been joined by Councilor Farrell, member of the committee, and Councilor Greenberg, who's not on the committee, but we love having other councilors here. Do we have questions from councilors? Councilor Mickley, I'm not sure who Naomi is, but we're not doing public comments on this item. Councilor Mickley?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I was going to ask about whether public comments are possible specifically for Naomi, but I guess you just answered that. So Naomi's Ward 2 resident I've been in touch with on GoGo, Numo. So a few questions. First of all, very helpful presentation. Thank you for sharing that. Very helpful to get all that data. One thing I wonder about whether, and you might have shown it quickly through the slides, whether there's analysis on what the cost to the city would be under different fare scenarios. I saw that fares are coming down, which I think is great, but it would be interesting to see what the cost would be under even more fare scenarios, even lower, just to see the different levers that we could pull and the impact it would have on the sustainability. So that's one question. And another question is on just what we can do to broadcast the opportunity more for GoGo. I think one concern I've heard from some residents is just not enough people know about it. So are there ways that, are there plans to broadcast it further? Are there ways that the city council can help with that? And third, just, what sort of, feedback you've heard, from residents in terms of the pros and cons and usage. And again, you might have shown that in one of the slides. It would be good to just analyze a little bit more about how this is used relative to Nuvo.
Thanks, Councilman. So there's 3 questions there.
I'll take 2 of them.
Okay.
We in fact did build a whole pricing model out, so we could toggle each fare 2, 3, 5, 4, 6, 8, plus the cost cap. The hardest unknown was how many more trips will we get when we lower the fare. So I think we put in a number of 90 or 100% increase with the change. I think that's high, but we wanted to be conservative on that. But yeah, it's a pretty fun model. And then we said, well, what are our goals? And that's sort of how we came up with where we landed.
So was the sort of decision matrix on that a combination of the budget constraints of the overall program combined with how many rides will we get out of this and how much can we meet the demand that's out there?
Well, this is the money we have within our budget without going over and being relatively conservative. What is the best pricing structure to set up to meet the goals? So it's close to what you have, but we have to stay within the budget.
Mhm.
How do we toggle this to better meet the goals of the Department of Older Adults?
What are the goals though?
Oh, we know transportation is a huge issue everywhere and certainly within the city. And, there's quite a change from Numo to GoGo, incorporating some of the feedback that we hear. There is huge positives of this is now 365 days a year, 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, and the increased coverage area. So certainly one of our goals was to try to meet those 3 things that we heard often during Numo, that, I need to get out of the city. I use a grocery store that's in a neighboring community. We had people on the weekend, for example, who, given our hours, they could get to church, they couldn't necessarily get home. So we wanted to meet those demands. So this GoGo system has met those, and we hear great feedback from that. It is more expensive, and we know that, but we have been kind of at intervals evaluating, going through models with Nicole, and we all meet and go through it to see how we can get as many rides for folks as we can at the affordable rate that we can. We want people this was set up to really give people choice. It's not just to medical facilities. It's not just till 7 o'clock. People can utilize it the best they can within their means to get where they need to go for their choice. If they want to go to a friend's house for dinner, they can do that. They don't just have to use transportation to get to a medical appointment or a grocery store. So it kind of gives that self-agency of choice as well, which is important to us to provide for everyone.
And then, so the other 2 were promoting the program and feedback from users.
So we get feedback 2 ways.
Okay.
We've always had the feedback through the calls we take ourselves. We also, with Numo, did a survey every year or every other year. And I was pretty careful to have very standard questions that can be used year after year after year. So we're going to reissue, and I don't think we have to change any questions. And it's, you want every question worded exactly the same way. What we knew then is over half the trips were for medical appointments, and I expect that will be the same.
And what was the, for lack of a better term, satisfaction rate from the users?
It was like we asked, I think we asked it in terms of overall, how satisfied are you? Very satisfied, somewhat satisfied. And it came out between neutral and somewhat satisfied. So if you move that to a 5-point scale, I think it was 3.5 to 4, 3.75 maybe. So we'll see. We haven't done GoGo yet.
It's not bad. Sounds like my wife with our marriage. Okay.
And it was interesting. You'd see a difference between older adults versus commuters because we had so many permutations versus low-income folks. And so we could splice it out in a different way. You can speak to the anecdotal.
Yeah, I can speak to the, anecdotally, the main concern we hear is the cost. The other concerns that we've heard, we've worked with GoGo customer service to address. So it's things like—
You mean the cost per ride, like to the user?
To the user, yeah. That's the main concern that we hear from the community is the cost per ride.
Currently or under Numo? Or both?
Currently.
Numo people love the cost.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
They didn't like the reliability, but they
I
loved
mean,
the cost.
it's pretty inexpensive, but it's a jump from what it was.
Yes.
Okay.
Exactly. And then the other concerns that we hear are concerns that when they raise them or we raise them with GoGo, they're able to address. So it really is, if you go to Newton Wellesley Hospital, how do you make sure you end up at the right door? We worked closely at the beginning with people who don't have cell phones, which makes any sort of system like this really challenging. So you need to provide all the information up front. So it was things like, I will be wearing this, and then the driver looks for however that person is dressed, or like an umbrella or something like that. And then also we have some people who need to speak to an operator every time. So we've flagged those calls so they ring right through to be able to speak to an operator. So really it's the customization of GoGo and sorting that out for each individual user.
Yeah, I would really encourage folks if they've had challenges or their Uber did come to a wrong door or something to call GoGo. There's no additional cost to call GoGo. They're not going to be charged anything for calling them. And they have really great customer service and who do this all day long. And they want to make it as easy as possible. And they can really move that pin and make sure that next time you go there, you're getting dropped exactly where you are. But they can't make the service better for you if you don't tell them. So I really encourage people to call them directly and with any of that, because they have all these levers on their dashboard that they can change for folks and customize, but they need to know to do it.
Sure. And you want to speak to the promote or advertise?
Yeah, I can speak to that. So this summer we did extensive outreach around our kickoff. So we were at the library, we went to the food pantry downstairs, we went to many older adult housing establishments, including Haywood House, Coleman House, Weeks House, Castleman House, etc. And we're thinking of doing a round two. So round two this spring when we kick off the price changes. Just it's easiest to enroll people where they are. And then hopefully there's been some word of mouth. So people who are happy with the service or have used the service can speak to it. And then I visited the Council on Aging meeting last week, and they had so many great suggestions that we're looking at. So to come up with some scenarios, so say that, a person at the Coleman House wants to go to the West Suburban YMCA, how much does that cost? What does that particular trip look like? Just to get over the barrier of not knowing anything at all about the service. Also reaching out to medical facilities in the area to let social workers and patient relations know about the program. Also trying to get people excited about different places they could go with this. So lay out the top 10 destinations or some ideas that maybe people haven't thought of that work really well. And we always encourage people to lower the cost of a ride. If you're going somewhere, you can connect to public transportation. So we'd accompany this with laying out a map of public transportation options in Newton. Also reaching out to the end user businesses that they might be visiting. And then trying to find some people who are happy to post about this on Nextdoor, Reddit, Facebook. So users who've had a good experience and want to let their friends and neighbors know about the service. That's really the best way to drive people towards us.
Sure. If I could put in a pitch for LaSalle Village.
Oh, yeah. Great.
All right, I have Councilor Farrell, then Oliver.
Sorry, Chair Clinton, is it okay if I just want a quick follow-up to that?
If you're done, I apologize. Go ahead.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks for all that information. Again, I think there's a lot of exciting things, especially the $2 flat rate, the Cooper Center. On the pricing, can you give us a rough order of magnitude sense of sort of what the range of impacts to pricing would be? I mean, I know you have a budget, but just, are we talking, let's say it dropped to $1 or $0? Would it be a $20,000 increase, a $200,000 increase, $2 million increase? And would you also be able to share the model with us so that we can sort of put our own inputs in? We are headed into budget season, so just to understand the order of magnitude here of potential fare levers would be helpful.
Right now, I think that we'll just assume, that there's 100% increase in ridership either way. Because that's the biggest unknown. How much is the increase going to change if the rate's $1 cheaper? I can run one right now while we're here.
Okay.
Pick your numbers.
And I just put up the funding model that we're going to be implementing soon.
Sorry. The question was about the change in cost to the city if we were to. I know you sort of looked at different options, so it's just about what would be the impact to the city if we lowered fares at sort of the bottom possible level, even below what this is,
Yeah,
And
they're
maybe it's not an answer you can give.
Pulling it up for you.
Okay, so
Okay.
6, which is what we're doing with the cap of 16, is for a full year, 263,000. We don't know if we have so this is FY 26. We don't have the CTTV grant confirmed or not for next year, so we're within our 275. If I go instead of 3, 4, 6, and I make it 1, 2, 3, that goes up to 309,000.
So about 40,000.
Yeah, however, the reality is the increase in ridership would probably be substantial. So if I take it from a 90% increase to a 150% increase, you're at 390.
So
You can see it's it's the increase in ridership that drives. the
Okay.
biggest.
Did you get that, David?
Yeah, so was it roughly $40,000 increase if we ordered to?
So the
Yeah.
price change alone, if it didn't change how many trips were made, would take it from about 266,000 to about 309,000.
Mhm.
But the reality is, and the thing we just don't have the data for is, you're gonna see substantial increase in ridership when you drop the price. So if I change the ridership from a 90% increase to a 150% increase, then it goes up to 390. So that's why you have to be a little bit careful with these things, because the last thing we want to do is shoot the ridership up. And as an upper limit, there's 1 million Uber Lyft trips in the city. We know that because we get, I think, a dime for each trip. So there's a ton of people that really want Uber and Lyft, and if we bring this rate down, more and more people in these age categories will convert.
What?
Not
Right.
using GoGo,
Uber
Uber and
pays
Lyft.
the city of Newton a dime. No, okay,
There's
go
a,
ahead.
the state gives, the state has a tax on Uber and Lyft,
Yes.
Uber and Lyft, so they actually give money and a little bit makes it to us, so the city gets, it's the TNC fee, and the city
I
historically.
guess I never realized that ended up in city coffers. Okay.
Yeah,
interesting.
so historically,
Okay.
the city gets 100,000 a year,
Still,
and it's restricted to sort of complete street style projects.
sure, okay.
What is CTGP?
Community Transit Grant Program, so that
Which is a
is,
state program?
yeah, it is a grant program, sometimes it's called federal. We apply every year, we've had it for the last 6 years in varying amounts. Some years we've had a match, some years we haven't had a match. We were actually getting the most of any city because our volume was so high, so I suspect we will get less.
Okay. Yeah, no, I was curious because something tells me that some federal grants may be in peril
I
in,
asked,
in the
yes.
near
And-
future.
And that was why we were especially cautious here, because I reached out to them, our application's pending, and they said, we don't know our future,
Right.
specifically asked, so.
Okay. Councilor Farrell. Sorry.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate it, and I'm sorry not to be with you in person. This is a very interesting discussion. Is there a cap on the amount of ridership that is possible for you to maintain?
It's just about budget.
Okay.
So-
So,
Infinite number of rides are available because it's Uber,
Yes,
but the city has a budget, and once that's gone, there are questions that have to be answered.
exactly.
do you have any sense about where your ridership concentrates in the city? Origins, as well as, I'm interested in origins as well as destinations, but origins particularly.
We have the data, we haven't laid it out. It would be interesting to lay it out as a heat map. To see where rides originate from. That's a great question. That's something that we could follow up with.
Right. Well, that would be interesting because as Councillor Mickley mentioned about marketing, I think he mentioned a little bit about marketing. Many city councilors have newsletters, myself included, although it's erratic, in which I certainly would be happy to promote this. and just trying to think of the most engaging ways to do it. So if you have some marketing materials that are sweet and succinct, I would be more than happy to include them in my my newsletters, and I would encourage other city councilors to do the same. We reach a lot of people, not as many as the mayor, but we do reach a lot of people. So I would offer that. But this is an interesting presentation. I thank you for it.
Well, thank you for the offer. We also have paper flyers, and then our website has all our materials translated into 7 additional languages as well. It could be printed from there. So I am happy to share with council a blurb that can be shared in newsletters. That would be very helpful.
Thank you. And I really would love to know, to be perfectly honest, about what the Ward 8 ridership looks like. So if anyone has a chance at some point to look at that and let me know, I would be happy to know that. Thank you.
Great, I'll look into it.
You all set, Councilor Farrell?
Thank you. Yes.
Okay, want to welcome Councilor Wright, who has joined us. Councilor Oliver, you're next.
Sorry, I blurted out my question. I'm all set. I jumped the line.
Terrific. Councilor Maliki, followed by Humphrey. Councilor Maliki.
So I guess you're still building customer base, but how many subscribers did you have when it was, you know?
Oh, that, I'll say this,
Although I guess it's not apples to apples because
I
you have,
think
you could have
more,
the high school kids.
more important to look at is unique riders,
Yeah,
per month.
Yeah.
I think we're getting like 200 something unique riders per month right now.
Yes.
Yeah, so with Numo, it's unbelievable, so many people downloaded the app. Not many attempted to take a first ride,
oh,
even less took a first ride, and it was just, that was just a standard funnel, and then there were the regular users.
and how many unique riders a month did you have?
Let me pull that up, I actually have that.
Yeah,
What's interesting on the unique riders, it's not that far off.
Oh.
And again, we're much newer, so.
and before, I know there were sort of younger people taking it too.
That's correct.
On your statistics, just interrupt me when you get that or whatever. So you have it by age and then you have it by income. Are people who are low income seniors in both categories?
Yeah, the vast majority are still seniors.
And how many users sort of hit their trip limit cap per month?
Oh, yeah, it's like 30%. It
30%.
was, I can tell you exactly. So I don't have the Numo, the one number I don't have is Numo unique users. When I looked at the end of December, in the very low income category, the average was 4 trips per month. So they were not taking 8 trips that they could have taken. Low income, 2.2 trips per month, leaving on the table 5.8. And then standard was taking 1.3 trips, leaving on the table 2.7. So it averaged out to maybe leaving on the table 30, they were taking 32% of the trips they could take.
Okay.
Again, you lower the price, each individual is going to take more, and more individuals will join.
But it seems like maybe they're using it for like a medical appointment. They're not using it on a daily basis to go to someplace.
Yeah, even with Numo, when it was really low cost to the user, it was still 50% medical insurance by seniors.
Okay.
And unique riders, like we could give out. I wish I had Numo unique riders handy, and I do not.
But it's for GoGo, it's about 200.
Yeah. Yeah, so I had
And has the
223 was what I had from December.
and is the $2 per fare trip to the senior center, is that already in effect with the
Yes.
Cooper at Hyde or whatever we're calling it? Okay, and I'm curious if, so 2 people want to share a ride to the senior center, is that 1 fare or 2 fares?
That's 1 fare. You can reliably fit a 3rd person in the car, that 4th person, not.
Okay,
always clear
so
what
it's
the limits.
basically on the trip, it's not per rider.
Right, which is a good reminder in our marketing to focus on that too, like
Right.
grab 2 friends and go to the
Right.
grocery store.
Right, that's good to know. Okay, thank you.
You all set?
Yep.
Counselor Humphrey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to follow up directly on Councilor Farrell's request. So I actually put in the same request for the NUMO information back in June of 2023, and I have not ever received that information. So like I want to know what zip code, per zip code, what's the distribution on where people are, taking the rides from, that kind of thing. Because that would just be helpful information to know, are we getting or not enough people getting it in a certain area? Is there not enough information in a certain area? That kind of thing. You could break it down in other ways, I'm sure, but I'm guessing zip code's probably the easiest. So yeah, I know, like I haven't exactly kept on top of that request, but I did request it like a year and a half ago and still haven't gotten that. So I would echo the request from Councilor Farrell.
Yeah, and I will say, it was interesting with Numo, the trips were really all over the place. I've got a map that I'm looking at from Numo. And I couldn't see any discernible patterns, especially when you throw in people's homes as always one origin or destination.
Well, and it may be that there is no pattern, right? It may be that the data shows that, in fact, this is very evenly distributed, but that is also important for us to know. The initial request that I made came up because someone, now I'm guessing you can't really tell when someone's taking a ride like this because the vehicles wouldn't be branded. At least with Numo, you would see the vehicle and know that it was Numo. But the request came up because someone in one precinct of my ward insisted that no one in that entire precinct ever used Numo. Now, it is my assumption that that's probably not correct, but I never was given the data to be able to show that. So, thank you.
You get some data for sure.
Yeah, we have the data already downloaded. We just need to convert it into a heat map to show the locations without pinpointing specific locations.
All right.
And I'm very interested to see where people are going outside of Newton as well.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
I
Councilor
would just wonder whether area councils could also be contacted. And even, go to one of their meetings for a short time and see what ideas they have to publicize it in their neighborhoods. I'm sure they would be interested in this as a project.
Okay, thank you. So I think you have a couple of requests data. I'm guessing Councilor Humphrey doesn't just want data through June of 2023. I'm guessing he wants to refresh that also to prove his constituent wrong, but get updated data. Councilor Oliver?
Yes, I thought of one more. Kind of building off of what Councilor Humphrey is looking for. Have you looked at, and I want to make sure I say this right. Have you looked at the average cost to the rider per ride?
Yes, I got that.
And maybe it's not average. I'm actually thinking more of like the
If you have the answer to that, then I've asked it wrong.
We got that.
I usually do that, right?
Okay.
Maybe like the median.
The average cost that the rider paid, very low income, was almost $7.
Okay.
$9.26 for our low incomes and $13.80 for our standard. And that is because 42 to 64% of the trips were actually above the cost cap.
Right. Well, that's kind of what you, right. If we had the distribution of that, you'd have a really good sense. I think that Councilor Humphrey, would have at least a partial answer to his question without a heat map. He'd be able to say, well, okay, X% of the trips are actually leading new.
Yeah, I did that.
Or are in excess of the cap, I guess.
Yeah. So we knew, it was interesting for 42% of very low income people were going above the cap, 48% of the low, and 64% of the standard. And what we realized is our cap was just too low.
Sure.
We want to capture more of those trips fully.
That's 16.
The average trip cost is
whatever.
$16.99. That wasn't the time.
All right. Thank you. I'll send you.
All right,
No more
Thank you.
questions or revisions to questions.
for now, we'll see.
For now, yeah, thank
We
you.
have at least 30 seconds until we take a motion on this, which could be hold or no action necessary. I'm open to whichever.
I'd motion to hold just in case we want to come back to this sometime later in the calendar year.
Okay, sure. Counselor Oliver has moved hold. Any discussion on the motion? All right, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, thank you. Really interesting. Really appreciate the presentation. Really good information.
Great work.
Fantastic.
I mean, that's a quick program. I think you're right.
Yeah.
It's a really smart way to kind of layer an important service on top of an
Yes.
existing Uber Lyft.
I think the $2.
Very excited about that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well,
Next item is item 1825, the appointment of Molly Doris Pierce to the Health and Human Services Advisory Board. Ms. Doris Pierce, if you want to come join us at the table, thank you for coming in person.
Yeah, of course.
The standard operating procedure here is that I will give you a few minutes to tell us why you're interested in serving in this capacity. Then I'll open it up to counselors to see if they have any questions to ask of you, after which we will likely move to a vote. So with that, let me open it up to you. We have seen your resume. I referenced earlier not seeing it, but I have seen it. I recall that now. But you know, in a few minutes, if you would, tell us why you're interested in serving in this capacity.
Absolutely. So thank you all for having me here. I also want to thank the mayor for the distinct honor of the appointment. As you said, my name is Molly Doris Pierce. I lived in Newton most of my life. I am a 2011 graduate of Newton North High School, and I moved back to the city in 2022 to get my master's in public health at the Harvard Chan School. I'm looking forward to working together with the other members of the board and Commissioner Lau to ensure that, you know, the residents of my home city have the resources and opportunity and information they need to live healthy lives. My area of interest is health communications. I do a lot of work around how people get information about their health, how we share information about health. I believe that good public health and human services are multi-level, from our most interpersonal reactions to, you know, legislative action. And I just am looking forward to serving my home community in this way.
Thank you. I'm going to see if folks have questions while I'm waiting for hands to go up. Just generally speaking, how do you feel about vaccines?
I feel very pro-vaccine. I actually just learned, I had a primary care visit on Monday, and I learned that I'm 30% of the population whose infant Hep B vaccine is no longer providing immunity. So I just got a Hep B booster, which is something I learned that is new, that it's a new vaccine. So 30% of the population might need a booster.
I had not heard that,
Well, now I know.
There you go. Great.
Yeah.
but I'm glad you got it. Councillor Farrell?
Thank you again, Chair. Appreciate this opportunity. Thank you, Ms. Doris Pierce, for your interest and support in working on this commission. I'm impressed by both your literal and figurative sword fighting experience. And the City Council recently spent a lot of time discussing the issue of how to help adolescents resist smoking and tobacco-related products. And I guess I'm interested in your thoughts about how this city and its programs and policies might work better to discourage more smoking and tobacco-related use.
Absolutely. Thank you for that question. And I know that the new prohibition just went into effect, or is going into effect for March. Yeah, March 1st.
The ordinance will take effect and it will apply to any residents born, or anyone born March 1st, 2004 or later.
Yeah.
They will not be able to purchase tobacco in Newton.
And so I think this is a good example. I was going through the youth risk behavior survey for the high school students today, and one of the things I noticed is that the majority of students don't view tobacco as potentially harmful to health, which I thought was shocking. Like compared to marijuana use, or they just didn't have I have the number written down somewhere. I just was really stunned by that because to the point I was talking about in terms of multi-level interventions, policy is great, but if we are so far past the point where students understand, like that our youth understand the risks from tobacco, we're missing an opportunity there to reemphasize why these policies are important on a more granular level. So I think
They did not see tobacco.
they did not.
They're too stoned to know that tobacco is harmful.
Yeah. Well, I also think back to, you know, it's a good working theory, yeah. When I was at Horace Mann in the early 2000s, David Tynes opened a cigarette in front of us, and there were like posters on the wall of like, this is what happens when you smoke. Nationally, we were in a much more public education process on that issue. And because smoking has gone down, the public education's not there anymore, which I think it might just be that people don't view it like tobacco as an issue. Like young people just don't view tobacco itself as an issue facing society right now. But also like just lose the public education piece of the harms of tobacco.
Are you familiar with Newton's public education's anti-smoking policies in school?
I'm not super familiar for what it looks like today, no.
Okay. Well, I guess I would hope that you would, if you in public health could begin to look at that and find ways that we could be more supportive of providing some realistic education and training to students to make them more aware of this, the dangers of this substance. I think that would be enormously helpful. I guess I'm really surprised to hear that kids don't even think it's dangerous anymore. If they don't think it's dangerous, then I don't think whether or not they're prohibited from buying it is not a big issue. But I would like to know at some point if you have any thoughts about looking at what we're doing in Newton, particularly in schools, or otherwise, and how we might improve the effectiveness of those programs. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thanks, Councilor Feller. Councilor Lovovitz.
So I have two questions. One is, are you aware of what the major health issues are in Newton, you know, in terms of demographics and the types of problems people have?
Sure. So I much of my perspective would be anecdotal based off of the like publicly available information. I saw a lot about, you know, mental health, isolation of seniors. I think this was a really good example of ways the city is trying to combat some of that. I would be eager to see more of the data. I could not find a lot of publicly available data, hyperlocal, as opposed to the state.
And my second question is, in terms of mental health, what types of interventions do you think we could use to improve people in terms of a public health initiative?
Absolutely. I have been thinking a lot about connectedness and getting creative with how people feel connection, right? So I think there are more opportunities digitally than we sometimes give credit for. It's not the vehicle for everyone, but I do think that sometimes we, you know, people push for in-person events because a lot of people felt the loneliness and isolation of the pandemic. Being at home was difficult, but I've seen it sort of shift for some folks who had a lot more access, who were maybe living with a disability or had, you know, other challenges of getting to like community spaces, had for once an opportunity to be sort of engaged while everybody was online. And so I think finding more opportunities to leverage all spaces in person, digitally, hybrid, such as this, to connect with one another. And I think to feel part of a community. I think we're all sort of still kind of stumbling back into this, not totally post-COVID, but.
So I'm thinking about what the mayor mentioned, that the Surgeon General talked about the 3 principles or main areas. I'm thinking more about this sense of purpose.
Yeah.
That was the last thing I think that was mentioned as a key component of combating loneliness, depression, all that. And I wonder whether we should be thinking about how can we make people's lives more purposeful, not just connecting.
Yeah.
But what activities can we encourage them to do where they'll feel more of a sense of purpose? So just something to think about.
No, I love that, and it's,
Not
yeah,
don't have to answer.
no, I
Just something to think about. I think that is important.
Thanks. I don't know if you're familiar with Jewel, the singer, her initiative. You can
I'm not
in
very
a world
worried.
or in world, I forget what it's called, something like that. It's fascinating. It's essentially a remote therapy concept that sort of brings people together, provides connection for people who are often, spread out and feel isolated. So I would encourage you to look into that. It's fascinating. She speaks articulately and passionately about it. It's impressive. Councilor Minkley.
Yes, thank you, Chair. There's a lot of things that I'm excited about with your candidacy, Molly. One is always nice to see people from Newton coming back and looking for ways to serve. I think a bunch of us here can relate to that. And also, just based on your background, very impressive and always great to see people that have experience with politics at various stages, the national and otherwise, and realize that all the exciting action happens at the local level. So good to have you here. And given that I believe you are a resident of Ward 2, when the time is right, I would love to make a motion to approve.
That's right, Councilor Minkley.
Motion to approve.
Councilor Minkley has moved to approve the appointment of Molly Doris Pierce to the Health and Human Services Advisory Board. Any discussion on that motion? All right, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, so committee is approved unanimously. What happens is it goes to the full city council. There is hardly ever any discussion about an appointment. It usually just sails through. You don't need to be there for that.
Well,
You can
there,
watch online if you're curious.
there is the talent competition.
Oh, I got it.
Singing or dancing is, okay, all right. I'm just kidding, just for the record.
I would choose them.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for
Yes, thank you.
willing to do this. Thank you for allowing her, supporting the efforts. I shouldn't say allowing, supporting the time away from home. You're welcome to stick around. You're also free to go. Don't worry.
We have a
don't
really
get
interesting
offended.
health and human services.
Actually,
I saw it, yeah.
the next item is kind of interesting. If you want to stick around for a few minutes, but you don't have to.
Great,
No.
thank you.
Have
all
a
so
good night.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next item is item 493-24. This is Councilors Leary Greenberg, Oliver, and others requesting a discussion for addressing distressed properties, improving rodent and harborage management citywide. I believe we're being joined by Commissioner Lau. I know Commissioner Ciccarello is here, and I don't know, is Jonah?
Jonah.
And Jonah Temple is there. Okay. Commissioner, if you want to come join us, come on. Is someone going to start this, or who's going to kick this off?
I believe Councilor Leary is on her way.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Councilor Greenberg, did you want to say anything before we get started as well?
Well, this is similar to the item that we heard last year. And unfortunately, the situation is still existing. And I understand there are other similar situations across the city. So Councilor Leary put this item back on the docket to discuss how the city approaches this type of situation and how it's reported to the neighbors and how the progress is evaluated. So that's why it's up again. Thank you.
Great. And I see we've been joined by Councilor Leary. Councilor Leary, did you want to say a couple words in terms of introduction to this item before we turn it over to Commissioners Lau and Ciccarello and Mr. Temple?
Yes, of course. Thank you very much for the opportunity. We just wanted to have a better understanding of the workings of how we manage properties that have been in derelict or in disarray or causing issues for neighbors or exacerbating issues with with rodents or vermin. And in some cases also having structural issues that concern certainly the neighbors and the counselors in terms of the residents being fit for human habitation. And it's as you know, these are very difficult problems, very difficult situations. It's often folks who are struggling or suffering or from, perhaps anything from hoarding or other family issues that make it very difficult to manage the home. So we want to know how the city can both best assist those families, those residents, and also to mitigate the concerns of their neighbors, and figure out how we can help them, not just as a city, but as a community. And the steps that we have taken. I know this is something that's been around, but we've discussed this before. Even when I first came on the council, I remember discussing issues related to hoarding or derelict properties. So I just wanted to bring it up for discussion, as we've had some issues in Ward 1, and we have been finding it difficult to manage them. So I wanted to bring all parties together to sort of, the meeting of the minds, if you want, to see what the city's able to do, what we might maybe think outside the box and figure out what we can do as a community to better serve some of our residents who are struggling.
Gotcha. Thank you, Councilor. So I don't know if Commissioner Lau or Chaparral, if you guys have anything you want to do. Otherwise, I'm happy to just sort of hear from each of you about, from your perspective, what are the things that the city can do in situations like this? What are the options that the city has? Sure, Commissioner.
I mean, I know the city does have grants that can help and assist residents through funds if they're in need. A lot of times, as far as some of these properties that do get overgrowth or abandoned or have issues like this, some of these are very difficult to work through and to solve. It takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of time from different departments, and we try to do our best. As far as where there's junk or material that are on property, it's sometimes it's hard to assess if that amount of junk that is on the property is enough to create a violation, things like that.
A violation of?
Violation chapter 5 of the ordinance.
Do you know, I'm sorry to put you on the spot, do you know what the standard for a violation is?
Yeah, standard is 375 cubic feet
of
junk, which is roughly a 7.5 by 7.5 by 6 foot block.
Okay.
And then it's always difficult to determine to the people who have this. To them, it's not junk.
Right.
Okay.
Right. It's subjective. Yeah.
It's very
This
subjective.
is a classic.
Oh,
yeah. I get it. But somewhere in there's probably a ruler to help you measure this.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's called your eyeball.
Councilor Alder, do you want to see if Commissioner Lau had anything to say first? Okay, Commissioner Lau, did you want to offer anything in terms of, from your perspective, what options are, what things, interventions, or assistance from your perspective can be offered?
Sure. I mean, we have a lot of different tools that we can use to address hoarding, rodents. I mean, I think many of these options have been discussed in this committee before by my predecessor. I think I will just echo what Anthony said, that when you're getting beyond sort of the so-called typical situation, it is very complicated because it is so multi-layered, and there's so many aspects of every situation, and every situation is unique. That but that make it just that much more complicated and that much harder to address, and it does take a long time to do. There are no measures we have that can happen overnight. But if the owners ever willing to engage, as Anthony mentioned, we do have some charitable funds that can be used and applied for to help with things like cleanup and pest control. they are limited, and some of them you can only apply for up to, say, once a year, for example. So it's not necessarily, again, it's not a panacea. We don't have sort of a magic wand that can help people, but we do have resources.
Thank you, Councillor Oliver.
Great, thank you, Chair. I'd also like to hear from the city, what, any or all departments. I'm really curious. One of the biggest challenges is the balance here between, the residents that are in need of help, assistance, guidance in some cases, and the abutters, neighbors, and the impact to their quality of life that's going on. And I think I'd like to hear us talk or spend some time discussing our purview there. Like, what do we think is the right way to kind of balance this particular situation that's been going on literally since I've been in office? Various interventions and actions have been taken, which great. I would argue, however, that the impact to the neighbors of the collective efforts have been, perhaps not as dramatic, perhaps, in terms of its impact. But again, I'd be really curious to hear how we think about that in the city of Newton, if you don't mind.
I'm happy to jump in and start this conversation unless one of the other two department heads want to take a stab at it.
Mr. Temple.
Yeah, so I'm not sure when it comes to enforcement that it really is we're not balancing the interests of a homeowner versus the abutter and the abutters and the impact there. What we're trying to achieve is the remediation of the violation as soon as possible. I know it doesn't always feel like that in every situation, and we're weighing what the different options are versus trying to work with the homeowner versus going to court to get a court order versus getting a receiver appointed versus going to file a criminal complaint to collect fines. None of those methods are perfect, and they all have trade-offs and downsides, and what you think may get you compliance fastest is not always the case. And especially in instances where we are getting buy-in and cooperation and progress from a homeowner, that's the quickest way to resolving the situation. And I know to people on the outside, it may not look or feel that way, but there are a lot of instances, just talking more generally, where we are making progress that isn't necessarily seen outward, but it is leading us down a path where we think we're continuing to resolve the problem versus escalating it to a court proceeding per se. That's actually just going to end up bogging it down.
Thank you, Mr. Temple. Commissioner Ciccarello or Lau, either one of you want to offer anything?
I'm going to agree whatever what Mr. Temple just said. It does take a long time to solve these issues with these complaints. And again, we're only working towards compliance. And a lot of times it can be a long drawn out process, unfortunately.
Councilor Oliver, you all set?
Sounds like that's the answer I'm going to get. So there it is. Thank you.
Councilor Leary?
Thank you. I have a few questions and comments. So what I'm hearing is that even if we feel that we're making progress with a particular residence, it's not necessarily visible from the street, and that it can take many years to actually resolve the issue. Is that correct?
I think that's fair to say. I think many years. I wouldn't necessarily go that far. But we're doing what we can to gain compliance as quick as possible.
Okay, well, a couple of things. One is, when does an issue, and I'm talking about maybe a more extreme case, not necessarily just, you know, a run-of-the-mill issue, because you know, people, we don't make a decision on what a property looks like from the street. That's a private property matter. But when does it become a public health issue? When is like with issues with rodents or improper trash disposal? I'm also concerned about fire hazards, and actually for danger to our own firefighters who may have to enter a home that has severe hoarding, and how unsafe that might be. And wouldn't in some cases the fire department want to inspect such a home to make sure that there isn't a hazard there if such an emergency might arise?
No, that's absolutely right. And there is a process, and the city has done it in the past to mark a building with an X. I'm sure you've seen that around the city at times. I think the Turtle Lane
I've seen
property
it.
had an X on it at one time, and that X is there as an indicator to firefighters if they were to respond, not to go in there or to proceed with a certain amount of caution. The problem we have, especially with hoarding, is it is usually an interior condition that isn't always visible from the outside. No city officials, fire, police, health, ISD have any right to enter a property. We would need to go into court to get an administrative search warrant to do that. And we've done that in the past, and there may be situations in the future where we need to do that. In order to do that, we would need probable cause for a judge to issue that search warrant. But when that happens, we would request that multiple officials from multiple departments, including the fire department, be allowed to enter the property for an inspection to determine what health code violations exist, what fire code violations exist, what structural building code violations exist, and then we would move from there in terms of enforcement.
So, Mr. Temple, what you just said, there was a little bit of a contradiction in there, because you did say that at some point you would have to enter the home to make that determination. But at the other end, you said we can't enter a home. So how do you resolve that? For example, if a home has, you can see from the outside, say that the windows, you can't even see inside the house, the windows, there's so much harborage inside. Say cars on the outside are stuffed with material. The lawns are piled with material and items and, you know, things like that. Where do you get to the point where you actually need to decide, do we need to do an administrative order to get into the house? And when you do the X, is that always, only do that on properties that are vacant? Or has that X gone on homes where there's still individuals living in the home?
I don't know the answer to that on the X. Anthony, do you know?
Yeah, if the X is going on the home, it means it is vacant. And fire have to go in to try and rescue.
Right, because sure that we wouldn't want to risk our firefighters to go into a home where there's no one living there and risk themselves, you know.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to, Councilor, I was going to try and answer the first part of your question, just to clarify. So to get into the property, if we don't have the owner's permission, we would need to go to court to get an administrative search warrant. I think you're saying, at what point do you decide to go get that administrative search warrant? I think that's where it's up to the commissioner of HHS, the commissioner of ISD, fire, whoever it is, to make the determination that they believe the conditions inside are unfit for human habitation, and that they have sufficient evidence of that to be able to present to a judge for a judge to determine there's probable cause that it's unfit for human habitation, which is a very high bar.
What is sufficient evidence, I guess? That's sort of
it's difficult to say. It's a case by case basis.
Has the city ever done that before? Have you done an administrative search order to get into a home that you were
We have.
concerned about?
I can't think of a specific instance at the moment. I don't know, Commissioner Lau or Chicarello, if you can.
It was one of the comments I first came to the city back probably maybe 2013. But I didn't know much about it. I wasn't involved with it. So it was an illegal apartment.
Yeah, and we've drafted them over the years and maybe ultimately didn't find it necessary.
So we've actually never done it. So I'm just wondering if there is a process the city has gone through before.
Oh, there is. No, I can remember going through the process and doing it since I've been here. We know how to do it. It's a straightforward process.
Okay, of course, I'm thinking of extreme conditions, right? So to me, it still seems like there's a lot of circles here in terms of we need to do this, but we can't go in the house. And if we have to make a determination, what we consider unsafe conditions. And to me, it seems like there are areas, there are properties that are like that. I don't know if we've, it seems like we're kind of stuck in a circle.
Yeah, I don't know if I would necessarily agree with that. Again, as I was saying before, there's trade-offs. So where you're dealing with a property with multiple violations on multiple fronts, and the homeowner is cooperating with us to resolve some of those, some of the more significant ones. You don't want to immediately turn it into an adversarial situation where you're going to go into court to get a court order to essentially knock down their door. And you're going to jeopardize the cooperation you have. So there's a lot of factors to balance.
Of course, I understand there is balance that you have to get. You wouldn't want to turn it into an adversarial. I guess it's really a case by case basis that you make these decisions. Okay, I have no other questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Councilor. I'm going to come to Councilor Wright next. To see someone going by iPhone with a hand up, but we're not doing any public comments this evening. So I'm going to come to Councilor Wright and then Councilor Babovitz. Councilor Wright?
Thank you. I just have two quick questions. I thought the X in a building means it's condemned. Or does it mean just do not enter? I thought it meant it's condemned.
Maybe it depends on the font.
Anthony, do you want to?
Yeah, there's an X and then there's a slash. Okay, so not a whole X, but just one side. There are two different types of markings. The one with the X means it's vacant and it is condemned. Okay, the other, I believe, with the slash mark would be that it is also just vacant.
I'll also add to that, there's lots of different safety codes involved here. There's the building code and the fire code, which deal with the X's. There's also under the state sanitary code, an order of condemnation, and that is a separate notice that would go up on a building as well.
Okay. My next question is, the previous counselors have brought up, is it seems like it's taking years to remedy problem homes. Is there something in our ordinance that we could change that would make this process quicker? It's very, very frustrating for the neighbors in the neighborhood to continually live in this situation.
Yeah, I do appreciate the frustration. There really, if there were areas where our local ordinances could be strengthened for enforcement across the board, we would absolutely recommend them, because multiple departments and spend so much of their time on enforcement. But really, these areas are governed by state law for the most part, the state building code, the health code. I do think the law department is working on a home rule petition right now that hopefully is going to be docketed soon, that will seek permission from the state legislature to allow us to increase some of our fines above $300 a day. But that's not really something that would be of assistance in these hoarding rodent cases that we're talking about.
Thank you, Mr. Chapel. I think, Councilor Wright, to your question, I think we asked that exact question at an earlier meeting of this committee on the same topic. It's a great question. I had the question too. I'm glad you asked it, and I'm comforted, I guess, to hear that the answer remains know that we, at least as a city council, have done what we can to the ordinances to facilitate getting these ordinances followed, and getting compliance with these ordinances, but go ahead.
But couldn't we do something like, if there's X number of rat sightings within a 24 or 48 hours, we take this step to move things along? Something like that?
No, I don't think that's something we could do, because that would not be consistent with the state statutes and the health codes. Because we remember here too, we're dealing at the end of the day with property rights, and property rights in Massachusetts are very strong, and it is nearly impossible to force somebody out of their house or to force somebody to do something to their home. So it is a high bar in a lot of these situations.
Okay, and there was just an article in the paper with climate change, our rat problem is going to be even worse. So, okay, thank you.
All right, Councillor Oliver, followed by Leary and Greenberg. Councillor Oliver. Oh, I'm sorry. Councillor Lovitz was before you. I apologize. Councillor Lovitz.
No, go ahead, Bruce.
I'm sorry.
So I'm more interested in the social psychology of this section, and whether there's some science behind it. For instance, how many people are willing to even talk to you? Are there ways to encourage people to talk to you? Are there certain, ways that have been established through research to increase communication? Are there ways that we're not using or we're not aware of or that haven't been studied to change somebody's mindset about what the problem is and its impact? That's what it's sort of I'm interested in, because if you say that taking the legal route is less effective, and I think that would be true in these kinds of situations. I would say threats are probably not very effective. But do we really know enough about, and if we don't, about how to talk to people who are in this situation and understand them? How to communicate better. Can we promote research in this area to help people to communicate better? So that's my question. Do we know enough about the psychology of people who do these kinds of things to be able to communicate more effectively and change behavior?
I think that Commissioner Lau, do you have any that feels like it's probably up your alley? Do you have any comments on that?
I'm not sure I completely understand the question. I'll try to address it, and you tell me if I'm off track with what you're asking. If you're asking about hoarding behaviors, and sort of how we communicate, or owners of challenging properties and how we communicate with them, we certainly have people who have clinical training, and case managers who have that sort of trauma-informed lens. What I will say is it's not usually particularly effective to just cold call someone and say, you're a hoarder. I'd like to introduce you to some resources. People don't usually respond very well to that. We are always here and happy to have conversations with people when they're willing to engage and when they're willing to work with us. And we don't have unlimited resources, but we were certainly able to connect them to either community resources, to talk to our social workers. There's also a case manager in the senior center. So if they're an older adult, that's, she's willing to work with them as well. I think one of the challenges is we're all city staff. And so some people, and I think oftentimes in these situations, I'm sorry.
You asked if you're addressing the question, and I don't think you really are.
Okay, could you re-ask that then? I clearly misunderstood it.
Of course, I didn't want you to spend a lot of your time.
Yeah.
It's really, what do we have science that we can point to, studies and research that have looked at the most effective way of approaching people, communicating with them, or is the way we do it now based on sort of quote unquote experience or anecdotes or what we think might work best? Because if the science is there and we should try to rely on that. And I'm not sure that all these people, you mentioned the word trauma. What is the role of trauma in their lives in terms of these kinds of behaviors or these things? So those are just questions. I don't think they need to be answered right now, but I would ask people to sort of do a deep dive if that hasn't been done in terms of the literature. And if it's not there, it's a prime area of research in terms of public health that we should encourage and communicate with people who do this kind of research or might be interested in that kind of research. That's all I'm saying. I don't think I need necessarily a response. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Councilor Lovett. Now, okay, Councilor Oliver, then Leary, then Greenberg, then Malky. Councilor Oliver.
Great, thank you, sir. So I want to kind of go back to I want to revisit because I have another question to follow on. I need to modify my question or my statement about the balance here. And I appreciate and always have I'm going to use the word delicate nature of the intervention or the change in behavior that we're trying to draw upon or to kind of to elicit. However, we have seen situations in the city that have taken multiple years to resolve, that continue to be ongoing, that exist in neighboring properties. And I'm going to, this is the part that I'll modify, because as much as I appreciate us kind of soft pedaling the solution to the core issue, I would like to challenge the city of Newton to adopt methodologies, processes, other issues that we can resolve with the neighbors that are immediately noticeable, provide near-term relief. And I'm trying to be as specific without being specific at all. But I think a majority of the folks who are aware of what we're talking about will get what I'm saying, because I believe we have instances in the city where a resident might be causing trauma inadvertently to their neighbors. And I think there's a way that we can actually work with the actual root cause of said challenge one way, while still mitigating the impact of said challenge on the neighborhood. And I have yet to feel like the city of Newton has jumped into action in certain cases in the way that I'm describing, because I do believe that it is a lengthy process, and Councilor Lovovitz was touching on it. We have certain situations, right? The root cause of some of the challenges that will take time, and they need, you can't fix a problem until someone acknowledges the problem is there and they want or need help. I get it. The neighbors have already said they have a problem and they didn't do anything to cause it, and they're looking for help. I want to challenge the city of Newton to figure out a way to more aggressively help. Love, John. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Leary, then Greenberg, Malky, Lucas. Councilor Leary?
Yes, I had just one other thought. If a situation arose where first responders did enter a home and found severe hoarding conditions or other safety or fire hazard issues. Is that something that would get reported somehow, or go into a database, or somehow rise to the level of this is something we should be concerned about?
Fire would notify ISD and more than likely,
Yeah, that information would all get shared between departments.
Absolutely.
Okay, have you received any of those in the last 2 years?
Yes.
Okay.
Some properties we have.
On some properties you have, okay. And what do you do with that information?
Once we get that information, we send out zoning enforcement. We find out through what the fire department has claimed, and we do an investigation. And if it's valid, then we write a violation notice, and then we go through the process of enforcement.
Okay. Thank you very much, Commissioner.
Councilor Greenberg.
Thank you, Chair. Similar to what Councilor Oliver has just said, I'm hoping that there's a way that we can support the abutters that are directly affected by the situations like this. I think it would be really, really helpful for folks to hear updates, regularly scheduled updates on what's being done, how things are going, and that they're moving in a positive direction. Because right now, from the situations that we know of, it appears to people that the city is doing the bare minimum. When I know that's not true, but to them, it feels like action's not being taken adequately enough. So if there's some way that there could be more communication and understanding of what is happening while protecting the privacy of the individual and property rights, it would be extremely helpful if somehow we can get more open communication, maybe a meeting once a month, maybe an email, just with an update of how things are progressing. I think that would ease a lot of frustration and concern. Is that a possibility, Mr. Temple?
Yeah, I appreciate all of that, and I don't disagree with it, and it's something we've been talking through. It's we generally don't discuss pending enforcement matters for a lot of various reasons, but I also understand the need for what you're saying, so it's something we're working through internally. I do think I can just provide a basic update as on one of the properties that I think is pretty well known in Anthem, and I will share that the city has been working closely with the homeowner and has engaged a pest company, and we have gassed. I think we've done 4 or 5 gas treatments of all the open boroughs. The most recent time being in November. We worked with the homeowner to get underneath the deck to gas the burrows there. We've installed a wire mesh under the porch so that no more rodents can get under there. To see the results of this progress takes time. The gassing can actually result in more of an immediate instances of rodents around as they're being dispersed. But we are confident that we're moving in the right direction with that one, and we can certainly look at providing more regular updates.
I think that would be greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Greenberg. Councilor Malky.
Yeah, I guess for Jonah Temple, could we get the state regulations that are applicable here? Because I'd like to understand better why they prevent us from doing anything more than we're doing, because anything that's been going on for years, it seems like you can say that progress is being made, but there's progress and there's kind of like foot dragging and slow walking. And
And I
It's,
can assure you, counselor, there's been no foot tracking, no slow walking. I understand the frustration, but we are all working our hardest to get this done as quick as possible. And if there was steps to take that will make it go faster, we will take them. I really want to be clear on that.
I'm not saying the city is foot dragging. I'm saying it's the people whose behavior you're trying to change are just not cooperating. And it seems like there's not a limit to how long that can go on. And I'm wondering what state law is that allows that.
Yeah, I mean, it's the state sanitary code and the nuisance statute. I'm happy to send them to you. And as I've said, there are other avenues and steps that we can take, but they are not necessarily more productive when you have cooperation from a homeowner.
Okay, thank you. I look forward to reading that.
Counselor Lucas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. I just want to thank everyone for joining tonight's discussion. Counselors are asking excellent questions. I just want to single out Counselor Leary for her series of questions. I thought they were excellent. Good job, Counselor. I do have some questions of my own. And it's just really when we first receive complaints or a department at City Hall hears complaints about rats and rodents on private property and hoarding. Does City Hall or the department head, do you contact the homeowner, telephone, email, knock on the door and just saying, hey, there is a problem here? That's it. Anything like that?
Yep, I'm happy to jump in. So, usually when we receive a complaint about rats at our property, we don't actually have a phone number or email address to reach out to. We don't have a database of all, emails and phone numbers in the city. So but what I can do is I can sort of walk you through our process of what we do when we receive a rodent complaint. So when we receive a rodent complaint, our inspectors will go out to that property to do a plain view inspection. If they are able to gain access to the property, for example, if the homeowner is home and allows us onto the property, then they will certainly do a more extensive inspection of the property. And that does sometimes happen. If they're at home, if they engage and if they allow us on their property, the inspectors will have a conversation with them about, what the complaint was, what the problem is, depending on the findings of the inspection, because sometimes we don't actually find anything. Remember, rats are, live throughout the city, and just because you see them on one property doesn't necessarily mean that's actually where they live. So sometimes they don't, inspectors don't actually find evidence of rat activity. If they do, or if they find conditions that are conducive to rat activity, for example, harborage, they will talk to the property owner about and give them advice on how they might make their property less attractive to rodents, or if there is evidence of rat activity, advise them to work with a pest control company or engage in other activities to address the issue. This strategy tends to be more effective, as you can imagine, with businesses, because there's somebody home and they have to answer. Well, they don't have to answer, I guess, but they do, talk to us. And so we've seen some really great successes with this. For example, this just came up at Walgreens on Washington Street, I want to say 2 weeks ago, where there was a complaint about, actually from Councilor Greenberg, brought to our attention that the dumpster, or that there's been some issues with trash management there. Our inspectors went out, they found evidence of active rodent activity, for example, actual burrows, talked to Walgreens, and that same day, the manager called their pest control company, who came out, treated the burrows, and then collapsed them. So we do actually have success there. Other strategies we use are things like, if we're not able to actually talk to the homeowner, either they're not home or they don't answer the door or something like that. We do send order letters. This is to address whatever the issue is that we find on their property. Like I said, sometimes we don't find evidence of active rodent activity, in which case we send advisement letters. But they may have conditions on their property conducive to rat activity, in which case we send advisement letters and just say, hey, for example, clean up the harborage on your yard. Other things we do if we are getting lots of complaints in a particular area, we have flyers that we can pass out. And this has happened both in business settings and in residential settings, sort of talking about how to make your properties less attractive to rats, how to engage, how to manage rat activity, that type of thing. I think I covered it all. Does that answer your question, Councilor Lucas?
Yes, that's very helpful. Thank you. And just how many times has Health and Human Services Department contacted the homeowner on Janset Street?
I don't have that specific number in my hand.
Councilor
But you
Lucas, Councilor Lucas, I don't think they want to discuss specifics or on a specific case in depth.
got it. Okay, got it. Thank you. The other thing is a question for you, Attorney Temple. I think following up on what Councilor Leary was asking about with respect to search warrants, and when the law department makes a request for a search warrant to enter private property for rodents or hoarding or something like that, has the city ever been denied a warrant?
Again, it's been very infrequent that we've gone in for warrants. I can't think of a time that we've gone in, gotten denied, or gotten it granted. But I know we've done it in the past.
So you have applied, but you don't know what the result was?
I think we've gotten we've gotten them granted. I don't know if we've gotten one denied, but obviously it can go either way.
Sure, of course, yeah. Depends on the situations and the judge, right?
Absolutely.
And just maybe this is for you, I don't know who to direct this to, Mr. Temple or Commissioner Lau, but do we as a city ever look at what other cities and towns are doing with respect to hoarding and rodents on private property? Just wondering.
Yeah, I mean, Commissioner Lau can answer for herself, but I know from a legal perspective, we're constantly in communication with the other communities through our legal listserv, and I've talked to other communities about this, and unfortunately, it's really the same everywhere. You know, when it comes to hoarding, it is, you know, from an enforcement perspective, it is the most difficult enforcement that exists for cities and towns. And kind of across the board, the experience is it takes time, it takes patience, it takes resources and a lot of effort. And unfortunately, in almost all circumstances, it can take years. You know, because of all of the complexities and levels involved, dealing from the mental health issues, the need for social services, financial issues. It's really difficult. So I'm pretty confident in saying there's not some magic bullet that you know, that Somerville is aware of that we're not pursuing.
I would just echo the same thing. I talk to other health directors all the time. I'm in various collaborative spaces with people, and they are sort of two separate issues, rodents and hoarding, but they are, as Mr. Temple said, two of the most complicated issues because of all the various layers that are involved. And again, so hoarding because of all the layers involved, and rodents because again, they are part of the urban environment, right? So I think, unfortunately, as Mr. Temple said, there is no magic bullet. I think we're all experiencing the same challenges, and I think that's really it.
Okay, thank you for answering my questions, and I'm all set, Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Lucas. I don't see any other hands. Councilor Malky.
Since this problem seems to be not unique to us and all over other towns, and we've got 2 new state reps, is there potential that it could be helped by change in state law? And if changes could be made in the, you know, state sanitary code or whatever, what would you like them to be? Yeah, I mean, this is not something you have to answer off the top of your head, but, you know, think about that, and if we could fix things in the state sanitary code or other state laws that are limiting progress, what would those changes be?
Yeah, that's certainly something that we can continue to think about, probably both on a legal front and on an HHS front. I know there's you know, there's not a ton of resources out there from the state in terms of funding and grants and services too. So that's another area where I think there's room for improvement.
Okay. You all set?
Yep.
Okay. Counselor Oliver, you're on a roll tonight with motions. Did you want to make a motion on this item?
Yeah, although I'd be inclined to hold this one again, simply in case it came back. And then if nothing else warrants us discussing it, we can always end it later in the year. Is that a true statement?
That is a true statement.
Move to hold.
Counselor Oliver has moved to hold. Any discussion on that motion? All right, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any abstentions? Okay, thank you, commissioners. Thank you, Jonah. Appreciate you all being here.
Thank you.
Committee members, we have a few last items which we can go through quickly, I think.
Thanks,
items-
everyone.
Thank you, members of the public. Appreciate you coming.
Have a good night.
Good night,
You
Commissioner.
too. Drive safely.
Item 16-25, the reappointment of Ted Chapman to the Parks and Recreation Commission. I see no hands on this. I'll move approval. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any abstentions? Unanimously approved. Item 20-25, the reappointment of Matthew Stafford to the Health and Human Services Advisory Council. Seeing no hands or discussion, I'll move approval. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? And finally, item 21-25, the reappointment of Asa Finelli to the Health and Human Services Advisory Council. Any discussion on that motion, Councilor Malachy? Councilor Malachy?
Oh, thank you. Okay. I forgot it's 4-3. Okay.
Councilor Malachy has moved approval.
You were very long. No. I didn't want to interrupt the flow. I will move approval.
Councilor Malachy has moved approval. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions? All right. And I believe that concludes our business for this evening. So I will move to adjourn. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any
Aye.
abstentions? Any opposed? All right, we are adjourned. Thank you all. Have a wonderful night.
Good night.